Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Poile Sengupta's name is synonymous with some of the finest writing in English, both for children and for grown-ups. And you are in for a treat today. Thank you so much for being here, Poile. Let's start with beginnings. And usually I ask writers about the story behind their writing career. In your case, we'll go even further. Tell us the story behind your name. How did Ambika Gopal Krishnan transmogrify into Poile Sengupta?
Shh. Ambika Sengupta is a classified secret. You're not supposed to know that I was christened, or my first name was Ambika. It is so in my passport, but none of you are going to see my passport. So Poile, well, there is a story behind it, I must admit. And it's now a family myth. I was in Kolkata at the time, and I was 4 years old when I was admitted to a school which was run by an actual, real, blue-eyed English woman. I remember her blue eyes because I had never seen blue eyes before on a face. Anyway, my father admitted me in the old-fashioned traditional way with his place name, his name, and then mine. So I was admitted as N.G. Ambika. Namara is the place where he came from, and Gopalakrishnan was his name, and Ambika was mine. But Mrs. Lesser, the principal, thought Ambika was a surname, like Ambike. And she probably asked me for my name, and I don't know. I was quite dumb. I don't know what I said. Anyway, she knew I was the firstborn of the family, so she decided to call me Poila Ambika. Poila means Pehla, firstborn. And that Poila became Poile, and I became Poile Ambika. So it's rhymes with oily, Poile, but spelled P-O-I-L-E. And Poile Ambika was the name with which my report card was written. So when the first report card came to my mom 2 months or 3 months later, she was horrified, and she said, this is somebody else's report card, not my daughter's. So she went to school and said, look, I've been given the wrong report card. They said, no, this is Poile's report card. She said, her name is not Poile, her name is Ambika. So they said, no, her name now is Poile. And I thought that, when you go to school, your name gets changed. So I had accepted that I was Poile Ambika. Like, in traditional marriages, the woman's name is changed. I don't know if any of you remember these kind of marriages. Anyway, so I was Poile Ambika, I became Poile Ambika, and I stayed with Poile Ambika. I still use that name, and I prefer it to Ambika. Now I've dropped Ambika, and I'm just Poile. And the funny sequel to this is that when my brother Murali was admitted to the same school, my father admitted him wisely as Murali Gopalakrishnan, so that there wouldn't be any mix-up. But the school realized he was my brother, so he became Murali Ambika Gopalakrishnan, which he hated.
I'm glad you demystified that for your readers today, Poile. In 1968, you began writing a letter to you, a column in a children's magazine about a 10-year-old boy called Perky. Tell us a little bit about that.
Perky, yeah. I was still, just joined college. I had been writing, but little bits. But when Perky came along, he came along, I didn't choose him or anything. He just came along one fine day and said, look, just start writing about me. And it was not just Perky. He had a friend called Raghu. Is Raghu here? Yeah. Well, he had a friend called Raghu. And Raghu was the most devilish, naughtiest boy I have ever known. You couldn't do anything with Raghu. I mean, Perky was okay. I could manage Perky. But Raghu, oh my goodness. Anyway, so I started writing Perky's letters and his adventures or misadventures in school and at home. And I wrote that column for Children's World from New Delhi. This magazine was published by CBT, Children's Book Trust in New Delhi. And I wrote the column for 3 decades. And I used to get fan mail. Everyone thought I was perky. And they would invite me home to eat cardboard sandwiches and, stone jam and things like that. And I wish I had been to one of their houses to have cardboard sandwiches. Anyway, I couldn't reveal that I was a woman and college-going person and a woman and all that. And I continued to be perky. But one of the very sad things that happened actually, we were in Canada at the time, and I wrote about 3 or 4 perkies and sent it by post, by mail, to India. And that parcel was in Kanishka. So all that I had written went down with a lot of people into the sea. So that was very sad. Anyway, I rewrote Perky's and sent it again. So it continued for 3 decades, 30 years, and Perky never grew up. Like Peter Pan, he stayed the same age. It's quite a miracle. And Raghu continues to haunt me, and I find that many Raghus are like him.
There's a Raghu in the audience, then something
Yeah, I know,
for you to think about.
I know.
Now, this column ran intermittently for 3 decades and even found a mention in the Limca Book of Records, didn't
That's
it?
right, that's right, that's right. It was not too intermittent. There was just once when I had to give my MA exams, when Perky decided to break his arm, his right arm, so he couldn't write. How could he write? So for 2 months he didn't write. He was in plaster. And then I think I had slowly to give him up because I got married and had children and all that. And there was this copyright issue that developed after that, because my brother, who's 10 years younger than me, and my children as they grew up, insisted that I had written Perky with them in mind, so that I should give some of my, whatever I earned from Perky, to them. Now I was getting 20 rupees per column or something. I had to divide it into 4 parts, apparently, so that they got their revenue. I didn't.
Today's session is a session of many interventions. We'll engage you quite often. And just around the corner is a reading from Poile's work. So I'll call in a couple of minutes Munira Sen to come and do a reading. But in the meantime, writers are often asked a question, why they write. And I found an interview where you answered this question, and I found your answer fascinating, where you say, and I quote, "I write because I have to. It is more than a need, more than a want, a passion, an identity, a gift, a curse, the demon, the Vetal on my back." Tell us a little bit more about this.
Yes. Very often it's that demon. It just doesn't let you be. When I just want to be a domesticated person and just go easy on myself and just eat and sleep and walk and eat again, this demon says, nothing doing. You get down and write. And it gives me ideas, all kinds of ideas that storm into my mind. And they just won't let me be. I just need to express myself. And it's not that I express myself only in short stories or in stories for children. I have to express myself in a certain way. I have to either write fiction or write drama or write for children or write for grown-ups. So there are all these options, there are all these doors that open up. And I have to figure out which door I want to enter. And some of the doors slam shut, but some of them go wider and wider, so I have to walk in. And that demon is still on my back and pushing me. And yes, other people say, but you have such a gift for writing. And I say, yeah, I suppose it's a gift. But it's like getting the same gift at your wedding that somebody else gave you 3 times over. So it's like that. But I have to do it, and I'm forced to do it. And well, that's the way it is. I have to write. I have to write because that's who I am. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it's for you to decide, I think.
So let's give this audience a taste of your writing. We have Munira Sen in the audience with us. Munira, if you could come over to the stage at the lectern.
Could I do something before that?
Absolutely.
Because I think
Absolutely.
the audience is feeling cold and they've come in through the wet. So we'll just wake you up a bit if you haven't fallen asleep. If you've fallen asleep. You know what I want to do, Sumit? I want everybody to garble. You know what garble is?
Tell us.
Well, garble is where you just speak nonsense language. Suppose you were with people whose language you didn't know. It would sound strange to you, unfamiliar, and you wouldn't know what they were saying, except that you would get the inflections, but not the meanings of the words. So I want you to just let your tongue free and just garble. And I hope you'll do it with me, like this. Come on, start. Someone start. Prem, Vivek, is he here? Sumit,
I can claim to have understood every bit of it.
Yeah, what did I say? Okay.
Meet
Yeah,
me
I abused
during
you.
the break.
Yeah, I did. So now Munira is here and I am settled. Munira, you're okay? Yeah. And Munira will read from my play called Alifa, which is the alphabet. And I thought the garble would lead to what Munira is reading, because we do tend to teach language in a very peculiar way traditionally. And that's what Munira is going to read. Thanks, Munira.
Thanks, Poile. Dearest, dear Asma, I'm enjoying myself at the Anganwadi. I'm not just looking after children, I'm also teaching them the alphabet. We have no books, you see. So I write the letters on the floor with chalk and then I explain the drawings. We have such fun with the vowels. This is ah, I tell them. Ah, and then I ask, when do you say ah like that? Do you do it when you want to show your tooth is shaking? Yes. So ah is for shaking tooth. And when do you say ah? Maybe when you drink cold water on a hot day, no? Ah, yes, yes. And so we go down all the vowels and the children make up their own stories. E is when you see a mouse in the corner. E is when you see a baby crying. Ooh is biting a green chili by mistake. Ooh is bathing with cold water early in the morning. A is calling out to somebody. And A is calling out to somebody far away. And all the vowels together, they are for making faces. A, E, U, A. And the children love it. It's funny, no? Dear Asma, I'm finding it so difficult to teach the women. How can I teach them the Alifa? These are intelligent women running a household, working in a factory. They are not 5-year-olds. It's an insult to make them chant E, no? Yes, I tried the same thing as I did with the children. Oh, Asma, what a difference. For a woman, is their husbands pinching their arm. Is a slap across their face. E is when he picks up a stick. E is when he hits them with the stick. Oh, is when they push him out of the house. He pushes her out of the house. Oh, I can't go on, Asma. It's a tale of unending horror, unrelieved darkness, blinding darkness.
Thank you so much, Munira. Having just heard that, Poile, one can make a guess that you write with mischief, about mischief.
That's a nice way of putting it. I don't know whether mischief would think it's a compliment. But it is serious. That's the whole point. It may be mischievous at a point. It may be mischievous at one level, but there is seriousness behind it. Because when I was writing Alifa, the extract that Munira read out just now, the vowel sounds by themselves don't have any significance, except when they are put together with a consonant and made into a word. And in Indian Sanskrit texts, you're always told vak and artha go together. Vak, artha wedded to each other. Well, with deconstruction, that's gone, because now you're told that vak and artha need not be wedded. There could be a separation, a slippage, and word is taken away from meaning, or meanings are different. For instance, I was just thinking, a child who's learning the English alphabet and does that A is for apple, B is for ball, and so on, comes down to Z, and Z is normally for zebra. Z is for zebra. And then he hears his parents talking about the zebra crossing on MG Road. Can you imagine? The child will naturally think that a zebra will cross on MG Road. Can you imagine outside Joy Alucas, a zebra crossing? Wow! He goes up the steps of the jeweler's shop. I wonder what he'll buy for his wife. Anyway, so that's it. Or somebody sitting on the fence, which is a favorite phrase for a politician normally, or who talks about the voters sitting on a fence. Fences are not comfortable to sit on. They have these pokey things. So how do you sit on a fence? You think that's what it's all about? Yeah, maybe. That's why they sit on the fence and it's not comfortable. Anyway, so, you need to know what the meanings are. The meanings and the words and their meanings have different meanings for different people. For instance, you've been to Germany very often, Sumit, and you know the word collaboration is a dirty word there. It's not here, right? So that's it. So there is a culture behind the meaning of a word, a huge, complex, complicated culture. And so when you talk of mischief, I try to be careful, but I also deliberately get mischievous, because otherwise I won't engage people. People will just get bored. And the worst thing about writing a play or writing a book of fiction or writing for children is when the reader or the audience yawns. I hope none of you are yawning. Well, I can't see you, so I don't know.
Well, if you are, help is at hand, because I'm going to read out one of my favorite short stories of Poile Sengupta, which is called The Passive Voice.
Passive voice as in grammar.
I did not like the school my parents chose for my sister. They should have sent her to my school, I thought, where I could have kept a watch on her and made sure she behaved properly. Instead, she was sent to what my mother calls a progressive school. This meant my sister thought she knew more about everything than I did and pestered me with stuff I did not care about, especially English grammar stuff. A few days ago, she asked me, "Do you know about question tags?" I almost choked on my milk, which is not difficult to do because I hate milk. Anyway, before I could say anything, she went on, "Question tags are little questions that are added to a sentence, like a tale. For example," here she assumed the airs of a grammar teacher, "You do make a funny face when you drink milk, don't you?" Or, "I am very intelligent, aren't I?" Now these little questions, "don't you" and "aren't I," are called question tags. I said quickly, "That's your friend calling you to play, isn't it?" "You've given a good example," she said, "but your voice should come down, not go up. Only when you ask a real question should your voice go up at the end. When you use a question tag, you're not asking a real question, so your voice should come down at the end. For example, 'I have finished my milk, didn't you?' I said, swallowing the last horrible bit. 'I've gone out, may they? I cannot hear you, aren't I?' I thought going crazy with those stupid question tags would finish them off. Later in the evening, my mother told me I had been very rude and uncivilized. 'Your sister is, after all, 5 years younger than you,' she said. 'If she shows off a bit, so what? You used to do it too at that age. I remember once I have a lot of homework to finish, Mum, I said hurriedly, and I'll try and remember that she's 5 years younger than me, not 60 years older. My mother gave me a glare but did leave me to my unfinished homework. There really wasn't all that much left, just some English grammar, an exercise in question tags, in fact. It's funny how not just history, but grammar too keeps repeating itself. Of course, the exercise I was doing was much more complex than my sister's simple sentences, but it is still strange, isn't it? The next evening, my sister started off on the passive voice. Do you know, she said, that the passive voice is used when we are not sure who has done the action or when it is not important to know who has done the action. For example, she raised her very active voice as if she was in a huge classroom talking to 700 students and continued, if Mom calls from the next room and asks, have you two finished? You can always say, the milk has been drunk. Note you're not telling a lie because I have finished my milk. See? You have only used the passive voice. Just then my mother did call out from the next room, but her question was, have you both finished the milk? My sister said, I have finished my milk and now I'm going out to play. And as she went past my chair, she whispered, I'm using the active voice now. In this example, it is very, very important to know who has done the action.
Yeah. Can you imagine the atmosphere in that house?
It sounds like my house when I was growing up with a younger sister. Tell us the story behind the story of the passive voice.
Well, I don't know how it is with you, all of you here in the auditorium, but grammar lessons in my time was always in the afternoon, and especially on a hot, still afternoon, where you can hear the bees drone and you wish that you were not inside but outside, and you wish you could have eaten something other than what you did for lunch, and wishing that school was over so that you could go home and play. So that grammar, oh my God, I think many of us hated grammar because of the time when it was taught. And anyway, it didn't make sense. I mean, think of what a gerund might be. I always thought of a gerund as a dragon with huge tusks for teeth and hairy back and things like that. So when I thought of grammar later, when I grew up and became a teacher myself, I thought I should write something funny about grammar. And the first story was the passive voice, which came very easily to me. After that, I didn't know whether I should talk about gerunds or something else. I did write a story about how mysteriously the letter E disappeared from the alphabet and from the dictionary. Oops. Can you imagine writing a story without the E in it? Without a single E in it? I don't know whether anyone of us, there have been people who try, and I suppose it can be done, but it's a great strain. Have you tried it? You can't. You have two E's in your name.
Absolutely. There's someone who's apparently written a novel without.
Yeah, I know. It would be difficult to read that novel. Or read that novel. No. R-E-D, whatever.
Our session today is titled Good Heavens, and it's a nod to two things. Firstly, it describes the challenges of writing for children. And secondly, it's also a collection of one-act plays for children. So tell us a little bit about what are the joys of writing for children and what are the peculiar challenges that you have found and resolved?
Well, the first thing to say, Sumit, is that writing for children is not easy. It is probably much, much more difficult than writing for adults. And the reason is that one is an adult writing for children. So one has to be a child and a grown-up at the same time, which is often difficult. Secondly, and this is a more practical challenge, that is, every child is unique and that age group is unique. You have to write for that particular age group. And there are slivers of age groups from when the child begins to read from, say, 4 to 14. And a child of 4 will certainly not read what a child of 14 would be reading. And so 4 to say 6, then 6 to 8 or so, then 8 to 10, 10 to 12, 12 to 14. Right. So you have these age groups for which you have to be very aware of. It also depends on what kind of school the child goes to, whether the child is in a cosmopolitan school or area or lives in a village or somewhere outside a city, and whether the child's parents are literate, whether they are readers, because after all, the person who buys the book for the child is the parent. So the parents also would have to love reading. So all this has to be kept in mind, and yet the story has to be fun. You can't be preachy. You can't talk moral values to children. You have to be mischievous. You must have fun. And when all of this has to be remembered, then it is difficult to write. But there's one thing that I don't worry about when I'm writing for children, and that is I don't worry about my being an Indian, a brown-skinned woman living in India and writing in English. That is a challenge when I write for grown-ups. With children, I just let myself go. There are lots of my stories that can't be translated because they are Englishy English. But now I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to write so that they can be translated, and I wish that they would be translated and given out to all the children in my country, in my India. And then I need to understand our circumstances and the way we are. And let me tell you, children know about family quarrels, they know about family politics, they know how hard it is to be without money. They know all that. They may not talk about it. They may not know it very well. They may not articulate it. But they know. So you can't treat children as if they're some kind of idiots. It's we grown-ups who are sometimes, very often, idiots, not a child. And the more you talk to children and you open up the world for them, the more wonderful you feel. Because that's what you have to do. It's not that you have to avoid talking about sex and violence. You have very, very much to be careful about not bringing cynicism into a child's mind. You have to show possibility. Possibility that the world opens up, is translucent, that there is dew on the leaf every morning, that the sun rises miraculously, noiselessly, every morning in the east, that the stars peep out on a cloudless night, that there is still this beautiful scent of Alfonso mangoes and ginger, and there's still lovely food to be eaten, and there's still the warmth of someone hugging you. That needs to be always, always part of writing for children. That happiness.
Poile, your writing for children is characterized by intelligence, sophisticated humor, and there's also a certain economy of prose that you employ, both in your writing for children and grown-ups. I'm just wondering whether that comes from your background in having started with writing for children, that economy of prose.
Economy of prose. Have you finished reading Tolstoy's War and Peace?
I haven't started.
Okay. Clever boy. Yeah, so I haven't finished. And when you see these very, very fat books, that look so important, I would be scared to pick them up. And when very close print, also with my eye problem, No, why write a lot when you can say a lot in a little? When you think of, yeah, okay, forget War and Peace. Go to a function, okay, and you have all these various people on the stage, and each of them is supposed to talk for 2 minutes. And they say, Yeradu Matu, Bare Yeradu Matu Heltini, and the Yeradu Matu becomes 2000. And it goes on. I mean, oh my God, why does one go on and on and on and on and on talking or writing? Make it short, make it pithy, make it wondrous. That's what it should be. And communication should be like that, like that. Unless, of course, the speaker is an idiot. But I think Ameya should come in now because
It's a perfect moment.
It's a perfect moment, Ameya. Ameya
So we have a young reader of Poile's writing, and she's going to read a poem called Fried Onions. And we'd love for you to talk about that once Ameya has read the poem out. Over to you, Ameya.
Thank you, Ameya.
Fried onions. People who are like onions make others cry. But onions in food taste great, especially when fried. So people who are onions, we must greet with a smile and wait to talk to them till they've fried for a while.
So who are these people who are like onions?
Are you? I don't know. Well, I don't think Sumit is an onion. I don't think any of you are onions. You're here, so you're great. Those who haven't come are onions. So, yeah, this is Runa, who's a Arundhati Raja. It's a very good friend of mine, a long-time friend. She called me up one day and said, look, I'm teaching, talking about poetry to a group of children. Do you have any poems for children? I have written poems for children, but I couldn't find it then. So I said, Runa, I'll write a poem for you. So I wrote Onions. Because it suddenly came to me, I was, peeling onions. You know what happens? Do you cry when you peel onions? Some people don't, very strangely. And you're supposed, they say if you hold the onion under water and peel it, you won't cry. But I cry. I have many, many tears when I peel onions. It really runs down my face, I can't see. So I thought about onions and I thought about some people who are like that. And that's when I wrote it. I like making fun of grown-ups. I know I'm one, but I like making fun about grown-ups. Roald Dahl did that too. All his villains were grown-ups. The children were intelligent and smart, not grown-ups.
So through your writings, you caricature the lunacies of adulthood. And I want to draw the audience's attention to this wonderful short story called And the Doorbell Rang. And if you read the story, you find yourself acquainted with the Society for the Advancement of Science and Suppression of Superstition, SAS. Yeah, that's the acronym. Tell us a little bit about this story. It's a detective story. There's a young boy who's at the center of solving it. Well, how did this story get written?
In Bangalore now, there are these beautiful locations. This particular one is located in Domblur. This is the Natasha Golfview Apartments. And in that complex, there are about 210 flats, I think. 7 stories high, each block. And they're all in a circle around a little swimming pool, which is more like a jacuzzi than a swimming pool. And there are thousands of people living there, hundreds of families anyway. And they don't need to go out at all. They can be right there within that complex and meet all their friends and their enemies. There are lots of enemies also. And just have riotous fun. And I thought of living there as a child. I got to know the place when I was much grown up and had children of my own. But I wondered how it would be if I had been a child living in one of these flats, up 7 floors and corridors that run into each other and all that. It would be really exciting. Because even if it was dark or if it was raining like today, you would still be able to meet your friends because you just have to run down the corridor You don't have to go out anywhere. You don't need an umbrella, stuffy things like that. So I thought of that, and I thought of this common talk, gossip and talk about the milkman, because the milkman would probably be the same for all the 210 flats, and how he would be behaving with each resident, whether he'd be a friend or not, whether he'd deliver milk on time or not. Because I remember the talk in the morning would be, oh, vandana inniki palkaram vandana இல்லையா ஓ ஓ யோ எங்க வீட்டுக்கு 5 மணிக்கே வந்துட்டான் இன்னைக்கு, you know, that kind of talk. So your milkman didn't come today. In my house he came at 5 in the morning and he rang the bell. So that would be the gossip. And the first thing that the ladies would talk about, starting the talking with the milkman and going down the day to the sentry at the gate who didn't close the gates even at 11 o'clock. So there's a lot to talk about, you can imagine. So that's how it all started. And this living in a community like that, it's great. Must be great fun. Would be great fun, I'm sure. You don't know about it, right? You haven't stayed
You mean
in a
Natasha Golfview? Never been there.
no, any community like that. No. I'm sure those who do stay in such a community would know what I'm speaking about. So that's how it started, and this group of children, all of whom are there, also have character and their own preoccupations. And of course, there has to be a plot. That's important for a children's story. There must be a story. It can't be all reflection and, oh, I don't know why the world is like this. Dunya aisa hai, zamana aisa. That doesn't work with children. So you need a story, and a detective story is a good one because you need to plot it.
Right. And just to give you a gist of it, doorbells start ringing mysteriously at odd hours in this apartment. And a group of children are solving this mystery. There's a young boy called Krish. Think of him as a young Sherlock Holmes. The members of his society called SAS, think of them as the Baker Street irregulars. Lots and lots of fun. And a milkman who says things like, tomorrow all milk will come correct time. Today please to excuse. It's one of my favorite stories. I highly recommend it. I want to talk a little bit about the names of characters in your work, and specifically your book, How the Path Grew. There's a village called Yarala, a town called Tathada, a little girl called Sasaha, and a clever man called Ha-Ha-Ho.
You've touched upon something that is very difficult for me. I don't know how to name my characters. You know, in India, we can't get by people calling people anything at all. Because if I called somebody Ranganayakan, you know that he's from the south. So every name, or Partho, he would be from Bengal. Every name in India has a baggage. And second, the surnames are even worse. So you like Ambike and Ambika, that kind of thing. So I have to be very careful with names because I don't want that baggage. I want the character to be that character, not somebody with a lineage, unless I deliberately want that. So I try very hard not to name my characters at all, if that's possible, but then of course it's not possible. I'm very happy now with Maneka Gandhi's book of names, because I think she's given a lot of names which need not have this baggage, and many parents, for the sake of their passport, filling in their passports, have got very short names now for their children. Ria, Mia, Jia, that kind of thing, you know. That's lovely, because Ria and Mia and Jia can be anywhere in India. No problem. Of course, they are modern girls, and probably something like Vikram, because Vikram is used in Friends in the serial, and so it's become an accepted name. But otherwise, I do find it very difficult to choose names for my characters. And Yarala, this town, and Shashaha, the girl. Ha Ha Ho is a great man because he wanted mangoes from Shashaha's garden, which was in a village, and there was no way to reach the village. His car gets stuck on the hill. So he decides that he has to develop the road. And so Ha Ha Ho gets down to it. He's probably grew up in America or something, or went to college there. And he sort of gets it all out. The village path is thrown open to a big tarred road, 8 carriageway and all that, so that the mangoes can come out of the village into the Tatadha town and then sent off in trains to outside, cities outside and places outside Yarala. So this was okay because it's a children's book. But when I wrote my play Samara Song, I couldn't do this Yarala business there. People would look askance at me. So I decided on something else. I won't tell you that because it's a secret.
Wonderful. I wanted to ask you a question about this gorgeous illustrated book for children called The Story of the Road, illustrated by the brilliant Mickey Patel. How did that collaboration between you and Mickey work out?
Well, I never met Mickey, and poor man, he died after he illustrated my book. I hope it wasn't the book that made him. But I didn't meet him. What happened in those days was we gave a script in to Children's Book Trust. It's a Children's Book Trust publication. We gave in the script, and they decided how to format it and who the illustrator would be. I had nothing to do with it. I was not even asked. I would have wanted a double spread for the last part of the text, but either they didn't have paper or they didn't think of it themselves. But anyway, I was very, very, it was a great privilege that Mickey illustrated this book. It's actually about demand and supply, the simple thing of supply and demand economics. Those of you who are economists, maybe you can use this as a text.
It's gorgeously illustrated, and if you can find a copy, I suggest that you do. There were 2 copies available on Amazon, and I'm very happy that I picked up both. I'm happy to give one to any member of the audience who wants it. Now, let's move on from your writing for children to your writing for grown-ups. And here I want to quote Shashi Deshpande, writing in the introduction for a collection of plays called Women Center Stage. She writes, and I quote, "It is a truth universally acknowledged, to borrow the words of a great writer, that anyone in India who writes a few short stories will move on as swiftly as possible to writing a novel. Poile Sengupta is perhaps one of a very small minority who voluntarily moved from short stories to drama," unquote. What drew you to theatre, Poile?
Yeah, I remember Shashi writing that in the foreword to Women Center Stage. Yes, I know. She talked to me about it and said, "I'm really surprised that you didn't do what others do." And I was actually surprised myself. It's like, you go into a strange town and you want to explore it, and instead of going down the main road, you suddenly see an alleyway. It looks exciting, and you go down that, and maybe you find a treasure, maybe you find a rubbish heap, but it is something that you do as an adventure, and that's what I did. The point was that later on I reflected that it was because when I was writing short stories for adults, and I was writing for children too, I was becoming very introspective and reflective, and that same thing of sitting in one corner and dreaming, and that kind of funny, I'm about to use a bad word, so I won't. Looking out of the window at nothing and imagining all kinds of nebulous things. And I thought I needed some grist in my writing. And what gives absolute ballast to your writing is writing for the stage. I tell you, it is so difficult. because your text is only one part of the dramatic experience. It may be the trigger, it may be the start, but a production of a play needs a director. So you are giving up your script to a foster parent. Okay, you're just giving it up. And then you have the stage, you have the area of the stage contained, you have the time, which is another constraint. You have to allow for music. You need all this ventilation. You need places for music, for sound effects, and for action. Now, if your script is dreamy and you sit and think of Picasso, then that's not going to help your play. Okay, you may be thinking of Picasso, but how does the audience know that you are? Unless you're Hamlet and you have long soliloquies. But introspection is not a very essential part, or should not be an essential part of drama. It needs visual excitement. And that visual excitement means that you need to write a text that allows for action. I'm not talking of battles and, fencing and all that. I'm talking of tension between people. You need just ordinary business, like somebody moving a chair from one part of the stage to another, somebody pouring water into a glass, something. You need business on stage. You need the audience to say, why is that person doing it that way? Why is that person moving up away from us? Is there something in that bit of paper that that person is reading? So you need something that engages the audience, which is not always in the text, but is in the vision or the sight of on what's happening on the stage. And I wanted to get into that. And I tell you, it was very exciting. My first play, Mangalam, my first full-length play, Mangalam, I wrote in 10 days because I got the plot, and the same set of characters in Act 1 come into Act 2 as different characters. So each actor had to play two parts. And the vocabulary, the time span, everything changed between Act 1 and Act 2. The costumes, the stage set. And so in the interval, the stage managers had to hurriedly pick up what was put on stage for Act 1 and put on what is meant for Act 2. So all that happened, and the audience gasped because they realized the characters looked different, acted different, spoke differently, but they were the same actors as in Act 1. So it was exciting, and then I got addicted to drama. So I kept writing plays, and for children too. I just felt that this is where I feel really happy. It was not happy giving the play over to a director, let me tell you. I had lots of fights with directors, not with a certain director sitting here who did exactly what I wanted him to do, but with others. And they changed the text, they mutilated the text, they put something else in when it oughtn't to be there. And the reviewer thought it was part of the text and said bad things about me, the playwright, all that. But it's like Krishna, who was, Orutti Maganai Purandu, Orutti Maganai Valandu. He was biological mother and fostered mother. So you have to do that as a playwright. You have to give up your play. I did that, and I have written for children because I think children can adopt drama to say what they want to say, and they don't say it in their own person, but in another skin. And also to work as a team, because the most important thing in a production is working together. And that's an important lesson for all of us to learn. That there is no leader, there is somebody who tells you what to do, but you have to work along with that person, and everyone is to be treated with respect for what they do and the craft and the business that their contribution to to the stage, to the production. In fact, Ameya's father was, Sudhir, was one of those who was part of our production team when we did our plays. It was, I mean, we just, when you work as a team, you're friends forever. And it's not just acting, there's so much more to drama. But then I realized, Sumit, that I hadn't done what Shashi said most people do, most writers do, that I hadn't written a novel. And I thought maybe it was time. So that's when I wrote Inga.
I was just going to ask you about Inga. Before we do that, let's get a sense of Poile Sengupta's love for theatre. I'd love to have Munira Sen come over and read from Keats Was a Tuber. You're going to love this one.
Yeah, this is a speaker who's speaking abroad, an Indian speaking abroad.
The history of my land, of all lands that have been colonized, is uncannily like the progress of a sexual conquest. Desire, advance, invasion, possession. Desire a madness and intoxication that does not allow for negotiation or debate. It wants and it wants immediately. Possession is deliberate, rational. It takes its time. It laughs. The act of possession is an imperial talent, the mark of the conqueror, Tenzing's foot on the highest summit, the English alphabet in Indian schoolrooms. But the act of possession is also consolidation, the domesticity of sexual thrall, the evening of the morning after, the lighting of the hearth, the sharing of a meal by the victor and the vanquished. Is it in those dark, quiet hours that the positions change? Is it then that those proud definitions blur and tremble? Already the definitions have begun to tremble. I have found my old cooking pot by the side of the Ganga, and the first blue rack rain clouds are gathering in the southwest sky. The stranger hears the insistent call of the coil. Where are you? He tries to answer, but he uses the wrong words. He always uses the wrong words. I laugh. I know what he doesn't. I have taken from the Englishman what was his. I have smoothed it and dented it, given it shape, polished it, fashioned it the way I want. And I know I possess it now. When the monsoon breaks, when bodies embrace, when the child is born, dark brown and glistening, who can hear the words for the thunder? Where is the roof, the fence? Where is the delicate garden? My life trembles with meaning, and yet whatever I say, the words I use are inadequate, an approximation. But that I realize the inadequacy is my victory too, the wealth that sustains me. Do you hear me, Macaulay? I have my revenge after all. Across land and water, over hills and desert, language is a traveling. It can never arrive.
Thank you. Thank you, Munira.
Thank you, Munira. Let's now talk about what I believe to be one of Poile Sengupta's finest works, her novel Inga. Poile, Inga is your first novel, and when you pick it up in the introductory chapter, you already have Bayet and Gaudimer and Murakami making an appearance. So apart from being a novel about secrets and lies, it's also a novel about literary references, isn't it?
Yes, it is. In fact, unfortunately, it is categorized as a literary novel. And literary novels, unfortunately, are also difficult to read for those who haven't got a background in literature. So I thought I should do a little spoofing and make it a little more fun, the mischief that you talked about. So Inga also spoofs Enid Blyton and Arthur Conan Doyle and Lewis Carroll. In fact, I have For Humpty Dumpty, I used a korokate. I don't know whether you, you would be. Those who live in the south know what a korokate is. It's a rice dumpling, and it's round, and it's like Humpty Dumpty, but it's sitting on a windowsill, and it's pecked by a crow. It also is a Brahmin, this korokate, because and so it has a sacred thread around itself. And the protagonist, Rapa, talks to it, and it's very pompous, this korokate, just like Humpty Dumpty, really pompous, and sort of asks her questions. You know how grown-ups always ask questions, and they never wait for an answer either. So Korokate asks Rapa, where are you from? And words, and asks questions like that. And when she tries to answer, he shushes her up, and he says that he is going to be knighted, but she wonders whether Queen Elizabeth would be able to pronounce the word Korokate. I dub thee knight, Sir Korak. Well, it would be difficult for the Queen to say that. And then he tells Rapa very sternly that she ought to know about family relationships, because the family on the father's side have names and titles that are different from the relatives on the mother's side. You don't call your father's brother Mama. You call your mother's brother Mama, right? So you have, and it's in every Indian language, so that you know very clearly whether this person is from your father's side or from your mother's side. I don't know why we ought to know this, but it's part of our bringing up, all of us. They say, our name, Mama re, Mama. Howdu, Chikkappa alla, they say. So that's what he teaches her, and she is quite taken aback by that. But essentially, Inga is, the theme of Inga is this obsession that the protagonist Rapa has for English literature. She is grown up in Delhi, and her obsession with her girl cousin Inga. Yes, Inga is an Indian girl, not Swedish. And that's what the book is about, and I hope you'll be able to get hold of it, because it was published by Westland, and you know what has happened to Westland. So if you can, please get hold of it. Maybe if Amazon has copies.
It's a collector's item. It's available outside. Now, one of the fascinating characters in the book is this lady called
Fish Eyes.
Great Aunt Kuppai.
Oh, Kuppai.
And she's the sum total of every aunt in South India who has a loud voice. Now, Poile, some people are born great, some achieve greatness, some people have greatness thrust upon them. What was Aunt Kuppai's path to greatness?
Because she was a grand aunt, great aunt. That's enough, isn't it? To be a great aunt in a family, especially when there are younger people to dominate. But Great Aunt Kuppai, and Kuppai is an interesting name, because girls apparently, when Kuppai means rubbish, garbage. So when she was born apparently after many infants died. So they called her this as a superstitious thing, because if they had called her Lakshmi or some good name Devi or something, she may not have survived. So they called her Kuppai to take the nazar nikalne ke liye. So she was called Kuppai, and she was a widow, and without, issueless, as they used to say, issueless, no child. So, and she was a very dominating factor in the household, but she also had a kind heart, which Rapa realized much later. And she had an insight into people, which comes out in the book in very slight flashes. So there's a lot in the book that you, the reader, have to figure out. It's not, I don't say it, but it's unsaid. And I think that's also something that I like to do. Talked about economy, I like to leave things to the reader. That's why it's It's not easy to read my book. At one level it is, at another level you have to go back to a second reading. Sumit has done that. You've done 2 readings of books. Oh, I find that amazing.
I mean, there's so much to discover each time. You could read Poile Sengupta's work as a child, and then you could read the same short story or that play 10 years later and come away with completely new insights. And that's what I love about your work. And coming back to Great Aunt Kuppai, she introduces the unsuspecting reader to this concept of adakkam. Right? Please educate this mass of Bangaloreans about what adakkam is all about.
Every woman here would know adakkam. You see me sitting adakkam with my knees together. That's what we've all been brought up. Yes, I don't know about Ameya Jaina. I hope she's more free than we were. Well, we all had to be submissive, subdued, not only seen, not heard. I remember being told not to laugh out aloud, not to show my teeth when I laughed. And when I had more hair than I have now, I had 2 pigtails, and I was told that I was to keep them in order. You know, the pigtails shouldn't sort of become mischievous. And if I wore flowers in my hair, the flowers were not to swing, because that is seductive. So so it had to be pinned, and ouch, it hurt. The scalp hurt with the pins that were poked into the scalp, and the plaits were tied very, very tight also. So your head hurt all the time. And when I remember when I got married, and I married very in a way untraditionally, because I didn't marry into my own community. I married a Bengali. So, but I was dressed traditionally in the South Indian style, with all these things on my head. And I looked up when Abhijit came into the pandal. I looked up, and my aunt from behind knocked my head down. She said, "Look down, don't look up. You're not supposed to look up." And I said, "Why?" She said, No, you're not supposed to. You're adakkam vernam," she said. Adakkam. All your life you have to have adakkam. What a horrible word it is, isn't it? Adakkam. Another word that I picked up, which also has the same kind of meaning is begat. You have a lot of begats in the Bible, and it sounds spiteful and spitting. Begat. Adakkam. Adakkam sounds like the supari, very hard supari. Adakkam. Adakkai, adakkam. It's tight. The teeth are clenched when you say it. Adakkam. Horrible word. Yeah, so that's what, and this was in every household. Every girl child had to be told to have adakkam. That is the greatest virtue in a woman.
So be like Great Aunt Kuppai, she's got adakkam. Now, in a book of literary references, Poile, you've spoofed the writing style of a lot of greats. In Inga, you've written like Arthur Conan Doyle. You've written like Enid Blyton. You've written like Lewis Carroll. Which of those spoofs did you enjoy doing most, and which one was the most difficult for you?
I enjoyed writing all of them. I loved that. I loved writing, and it was not easy, because one had to take the style over but not make it too comic either. And so I had to balance between that. The greatest fun was talking about food, like Enid Blyton talks about food. You know, the gingerbread and the cakes and things like that. Imagine having to write about idlis and chutney, which are so ordinary for us, but would be exciting for someone who's never had it. So I had to write in the same style. I remember reading Enid Blyton, mouth watering over those beautiful things that those children ate, eclairs and things like that. But when I finally ate gingerbread, it was awful. I don't know why anyone thought it was nice to eat. and those, what are those striped peppermints? Yeah, bullseyes. I don't know whether any of you, they used to be huge. And the peppermint was quite kara, in the mouth. It was quite spicy. And it went on forever. But it was fun trying to make idlis and chutney and vadas sound so exciting and mouth-watering. I loved doing that. But I also enjoyed Conan Doyle because he has such a stately way of writing. He has such a beautiful style, long sentences and very dignified sentences, not at all like Enid Blyton. I liked that too. And in this case, the Arthur Conan Doyle spoof was actually also a progression in the main narrative. So you couldn't give it up. I remember one reviewer on Goodreads said, I left out all those boring bits, that is the spoofs. And I wish he or she hadn't, because they were fun and they also had contributed to the narrative, the main story, the plot.
I think they're some of the best passages in Inga, and I do believe that sincerely that Inga is one of your finest works. 2 quotes about Inga, one by the author herself. In Inga, I wanted to take the English language by its neck and make it writhe and twist and coil and dance and bloom. Unquote. Now, Suresh Menon, writing for DNA Mumbai, called Inga Booker-worthy. And in his review, he said, Sengupta, the playwright, handles dialogue deftly. In prose, she is mistress of what is left unsaid. So again, coming back to that economy of prose and your philosophy of less is more, Inga definitely is one of your finest works. I'm also excited to talk about your latest work, A Time for Ebby. Before that, is there something more you'd like to tell us about Inga?
No, I just wanted to thank you.
There are 7 copies of Inga made very kindly available by Bookworm outside. As I said earlier, they are now collector's items because they're hard to get your hands on. So please pick up a copy, get it signed by Poile. Her latest work is called A Time for Ebby. And before we talk about the work, I'd love to invite Ameya on stage again to read from the book.
Thank you, Ameya.
A Time for Ebby. The Ebons made the best grandfather clocks in the town of Nimish. The present head of Ebon and Sons began to learn clockmaking from his father when he was about 7 years old. That father Ebon learnt it from his father, grandfather Ebon, who learnt it from his father, great-grandfather Ebon, who in turn had learnt it from his father, great-great-grandfather Ebon. And so it went back, 8 generations of Ebons. 5 times great-grandfather Ebon was the first clockmaker in the family. It is said that he learnt his craft from a stranger, a sailor who knocked at his door late one winter evening. 5 times great-grandfather Ebon made him welcome, and in return, the stranger taught him all that he knew about clockmaking. He then disappeared, as mysteriously as he had come. The sailor not only taught 5 times great-grandfather Ebon how to make grandfather clocks, but also told him 2 secrets which were to be kept safe by the family. One of the secrets was about how to recognize an Ebon grandfather clock from those made by other clockmakers. Somewhere inside the cabinet of the Ebon grandfather clock would be engraved a few lines of verse. Only the head of the family knew what those lines were and where in the cabinet they could be found. The lines were etched so fine that they could be seen only if you knew what to look for. The words themselves were these: Time is never old. Time is never young. Time is never still. Time you cannot hold. The family did not remember the second secret. This often happens when people get busy and do not regard what came before. And so it had been for 8 generations. The Ebon House, built by 5 times great-grandfather Ebon, still stood tall and elegant at the edge of town. It could be seen from far away, and visitors exclaimed with wonder at its gleaming white walls and rich red roofs. The house was surrounded by the Ebon estate, with woodlands at its edge and a large garden, sweet with the scent of 1,000 flowers and chirping of happy birds. It was a fairy tale home. Yet the eighth father, Ebon, the present head of the family, was unhappy. He often sat in his beautiful garden under his favorite chestnut tree, holding his head in his hands and worrying. As he worried, he felt sadder and sadder. He felt he was the unluckiest Ebon ever to be born.
Thank you, Amaya.
Thank you so much, Amaya. You write in the beginning of the book that you were inspired by this grandmother clock that you saw in a friend's house. Tell us, what exactly is a grandmother clock?
Yeah, this was a real one of those beautiful moments. We'd gone to California and we went to a friend's house there. And as we were leaving after lunch, I suddenly saw this stand-alone clock, which didn't look like a grandfather clock, because I've seen grandfather clocks, but this didn't look like one. It was shorter and it was more decorative than grandfather clocks. The top of the cabinet was carved like a cloth with lace on it. So I asked the lady of the house, and she said it's a grandmother clock, and it was a wedding present for her from her husband. And she said he picked it up at an auction, and it's one of the few grandmother clocks that, I had never heard of a grandmother clock, nor had she then. She said she knew of a few more later. But a grandmother clock made me immediately think of grandmothers and how cozy they are. And this one was particularly cozy because this grandmother clock, she never kept time. The lady said that she had now grown very old and that she kept time, she was, accurate on time only twice a day. And it was lovely to see the grandmother clock. She looked very, very endearing. And I got home and I wondered what I should do, because I couldn't leave the grandmother clock alone. I had to do something about her. Should I write about her as a grown-up, as non-fiction, as a part of a travel log? I didn't know, but then I decided finally to write a children's story. And so that's how A Time for Ebby came about. And I didn't talk about not keeping time, but I did talk about finding a grandmother clock and how exciting that is. Now, the whole point, Sumit, is that when we talking about writing for children, writing for grown-ups, is there a difference? There isn't. There are the differences I talked about earlier, but actually writing for children and writing for grown-ups takes the same amount of effort, same amount of thinking, perhaps more for children, because when you're writing for grown-ups, you are in the same landscape. You know where the potholes are and where you have to avoid walking and the minefields are. But when you write for children, you have to be very careful, as I said. So when someone says, oh, that is just a children's book, I feel very upset, because it's not just a children's book, like Jane Austen's heroine says. It's not just a novel. It's not just a children's book. It is a children's book. And that child will either love or not love the book, but that child will read the book, and that child will remember. All of us remember what we read when we were children. We still are children inside of us, aren't we? We can put on all these trappings of being grown up and leaving childish estate behind, as Eliot said, but we haven't really left it behind us. And so go back to that child. It's still in there. And read books for children. And please give your children books. And let them choose. Let them look at the illustrations. And there was this wonderful book, I wish I could remember the writer, who wrote about prime numbers. I want to write about 0. for children, but it has to be a book both for children and for grown-ups. And many, many real good books are both for children and for grown-ups. I mean, don't dismiss a book because it says meant for age group 4 to 8 or 4 to 6 or whatever. Maybe there's something very exciting in that book which you see, which the child may not. Maybe it's a family book that you read to the child, and the child reads as they grow up. Maybe it's like that. So please, it is very much the same thing. You have to show the wonder of the world to both children and grown-ups. You have to understand the dexterity of language, whichever language it is, to both adult and the child. You have to bring in lyricism. You have to bring in that rising sun, that dew on the leaf, for both children and adults. We must all live in a world of wonder, always. Otherwise, how are we to live? We need that wonder, don't we, every day? We do. And that's the only way to survive in a world that is so troubled. So expand your mind into reading for, children's books and bringing books to your children and grandchildren. And let's hope this works out for all of us.
Poile, I've known you for over a decade. I've known your work for over 2 decades. And during this time, I've immersed myself in it, marinated in its beauty. And when I look upon your writing, I think there's an artificial division between your writing for children and your writing for adults. I think your writing for children is your writing for adults. Much like I think about Bill Watterson and Calvin and Hobbes. Is Calvin and Hobbes a comic strip for a young child? Perhaps. But it's also a comic strip for grown-ups, and you can read so much meaning into it. Now, you've had an astonishingly versatile, prolific, trailblazing, genre-bending career spanning across short stories, plays, poetry, illustrated books, a full-length musical for children, and now this cracker of a novel called Inga. How do you feel about all the things that you've been able to accomplish over this rich and successful literary career?
Successful? I don't know. But I've never got an award yet. So I don't know. How do I feel? I don't know. I've never thought of it because I'm always thinking of what next rather than what's done. And yeah, I loved writing that Yavama Jaka, that musical, full-length play for children. Can you say Yavama Jaka very quickly, 10 times?
Yavama Jaka, Yavama Jaka, Yavama Jaka, Yavama Jaka.
He's good.
Yavama Jaka, Yavama Jaka, Yavama Jaka.
He's good. Yavama Jaka, Yavama Jaka, Yavama Jaka. Okay. It's a Jataka tale. And it's a very short 4-line story. And it had so much potential. And so I wrote that musical, and Preetham Koil Pillai wrote the music for it. And we had children in the play, and it was such a fantastic production. And it was directed by my husband. And it was a really good production, and we really enjoyed doing it. So really, I must say, whether it was writing Alifa or writing Yavama Jaka, I had the same demon on my back and the same joy at the end of it. Whether it's writing Inga or writing The Passive Voice, it is the same toil, it is the same scratching of the head, it is the same sleepless nights, the same looking desperately for the right word, and scratching out, redrafting, all of that. All that is required. What to do? That is the writer's world. It is wondrous at the end of it, but wondrousness also has that muddy slush at the bottom from which beautiful things come out. That darkness from which the seed sprouts into a massive tree, they both exist. And they're both in me, and so I have to live with it. But I don't know how I feel. I really don't know. I'm thinking of my next book, which is already starting to sprout out of the slush and the potholes in Bangalore. Yeah. So I wouldn't know how to answer that.
That's fair enough. This is a wonderful moment to open this up to the audience. If you have a question, there's a question. Please come over to the mic over here. Go ahead.
I'm Vatsala Dikuna. I do know Poile and Abhijit both actually as neighbors and some friends. Okay, two quick questions. One is, Poile, which were the languages you grew up with? Which language did you speak to your parents and siblings and the neighbors? And the other question is, when you start a piece of writing, do you start by deciding that this is a children's book, going to be a children's book or a grown-ups book? Or does it become that as you progress? And I have, by the way, seen
Yavamajaka.
Yavamajaka with my daughter when she was like tiny, and enjoyed it very much.
Thanks, Vatsala. Yeah, it's both questions are very interesting. Languages, well, I grew up in Kerala, so we spoke Tamil and Malayalam, but also a language that is a hybrid of Tamil and Malayalam. So we were looked down on by the Tamilians and by the Malayalis, because we spoke neither Tamil properly nor Malayalam properly, but brought it all together. But my parents actually wrote to each other in their courting days in the Malayalam script, but the Tamil language, which I thought was very, very exciting. My father actually wrote romantic poetry to my mother, which I knew much later. So then I grew up in Delhi, so of course I was in a convent school, so I got to know English, and then English adopted me and picked me up by my hair, and I became English Indian, Macaulay Motley, and then I married Bengali. So then I had to learn Bangla, which, let me tell you, I speak better than my husband, though he denies it. And then we came here, and of course, Kannada is a beautiful language, and Abhijit had to learn Kannada, reading and writing. I have not yet learnt the script, but I do speak Kannada, so that is another language. So that's about languages. And when we speak at home, we speak in a mixture of languages, and sometimes I use the wrong language for the wrong person, and all that happens also. Then about the second one. Well, that is a very interesting question and difficult to answer. I'll tell you why. Because creative writing or anything creative is very difficult to figure out the process, you know. You don't know how it happens. How you decide in some part of your mind that this is going to be a book for children, or it's going to be something for grown-ups, it's going to be short fiction, or it's going to be a play, it's going to be this long or this short. It just happens in a very strange way. It's like you put a mustard seed into the mud and it suddenly grows into a mustard plant. It's like that. It's very mysterious. It's as mysterious as all of us are. I mean, how are we formed? How do we think? How is it that we think in a certain way and speak in a certain way? We are all mysteries, aren't we? Even to ourselves. Well, that's how it is. It is something I can't explain, or I don't have the words for it. And I think also in some part of me says, leave it be. Don't try and analyze it. Just let it happen. I think a lot of things just happen. And most of it is good.
Any other questions in the audience? Just raise your hand. If you don't, then I'll cheat and ask an additional question. Please come over to the mic, ma'am.
Say thank you for a wonderful performance. Because, you know, the animation, the changes in tone, the way you make your comments, the way you presented everything, I wish it could go on much longer. And perhaps we could have such a session again. So as I said, mine is not a question, it's more to thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shamla. That is so wonderful of you to say so.
I'm Shamla Narayan. I was a professor of English, and basically I'm a literary historian.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shamla, for your comment. And, I was going to joke to Shamla that I have enough material. So thank you so much for being a lovely audience. We'd just like to thank a few people before we close today. We'd like to thank the Bangalore International Center for giving us this lovely venue. We'd like to thank from the BIC team, Ravi, Raghu, Lekha, to our lovely readers for today, Munira Sen and Ameya. Thank you for reading brilliantly from Poile's work. Thank you, Abhijita, for all your help behind the scenes. And most of all, thank you so much, Poile Sengupta, for agreeing to this conversation. You've had a brilliant writing career. It's, as I said earlier, versatile, prolific, genre-bending, trailblazing. And in a recent interview with Ramji Chandran on the Literary City podcast, he said, Poile Sengupta has written widely and written well. I think that's a great way to describe all of the things that she's done. Poile Sengupta, I do think that you're a treasure. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, give a big round of applause.
Thank you. And thank you, Sumit. He's one smart moderator. Huh? He's really, really good. I didn't know, I wouldn't have been able to do it. But Sumit, there's one thing. Everybody is looking a little sad, I think. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they have to say why. Maybe. But let's not say bye. Let's just be happy. I'm going to sing, and you're going to follow me, and everyone is going to follow what I say, what I sing. Okay?
Sounds
it's
good.
a very simple song. Okay? So repeat after me. H-A-P-P-Y.
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 I think I am.
I think I am.
I know I am.
I know I am.
H-A-P-P-Y.
H-A-P-P-Y.
So H-A-P-P-Y, H-A-P-P-Y, I think I am, I know I am, H-A-P-P-Y. Come on! H-A-P-P-Y, H-A-P-P-Y, I think I am, I know I am, H-A-P-P-Y. Can you sing it with a cough?
I was doing that last week when I was sick.
Yeah. And then can you sing it very fast, like one of those sixers that Kohli hits, huh? H-A-P-P-Y, H-A-P-P-Y, I think I am, I know I am, H-A-P-P-Y, faster, H-A-P-P-Y, faster, H-A-P-P-Y, H-A-P-P-Y, I think I am, I know I am, H-A-P-P-Y, H-A-P-P-Y, clap, H-A-P-P-Y, I think I am, I know I am, H-A-P-P-Y, faster, H-A-P-P-Y, H-A-P-P-Y, I think I am, I know I am, H-A-P-P-Y, I think I am, I know I am, H-A-P-P-Y. Thank you.
Thank you so much.